So, Kerry, it is a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be able to chat with you about this topic. It's something that's near and dear to me because I've sold in different environments. I've had to sell to in a traditional sales experience, but I've also had to sell in just networking where there wasn't a defined presentation. And I used this model. I really like this model of selling the way people like to buy. And what I've done is I've made it a framework that owners and executives can use because we sell differently. We sell differently as an owner than we do as a salesperson. What I mean by that, you might be out networking. You're out there just meeting people and you run into another owner who might be a client of yours, but at that level that they're buying and you're selling, it might be a 2-year sales cycle. So that is not a defined sales presentation. If you start trying to sell them in that networking event, it'll very quickly get into this awkward thing where you're overselling and they're saying no. And one of the things that I think is really important is you want people in the prospect mode saying yes. You want them nodding their head. You want them saying yes. When they're taking action like that, they're actually creating a narrative, an internal narrative that becomes their identity. If a person says, no, I don't think it's for me, and that thought sits with them for a while, it becomes part of their identity. And now they have to say no to be consistent with their identity. So we want to avoid, now, this is not about hocus pocus or mumbo jumbo or tricking people. This is about a real person who is a valid potential client, has a valid need, and you having a service that can fill that need. And what we're doing is using what we know about neuroscience to make it more likely for the two of you to come together. Again, I'm emphasizing this is not about tricking people. This is not about, there's more than enough of that stuff out there, and I abhor it. But when there is a real need and a connection, I think that we should show up as the best version of ourselves. And why not use the tools that the bad guys are using to make people buy stuff that they don't need and use those tools to do goodness? And that's where this is coming from. By structuring the presentation in such a way that they don't say no, what you're doing is having more yeses. After a certain amount of yeses, the person almost has to say yes to the offer, because the same thing works in the opposite. Their identity is now associated with them saying yes, or I should say saying yes is now associated with their identity. They would feel incongruent to not follow through. So that's the basis of this approach. Do you have any questions about that, or anything you want to comment on?
No, I'm following you in that conversation specifically related to an owner that is in a selling situation and should be always selling and representing their brand and knowing what their brand is and knowing who they serve. And the only way they're going to find out if there is an opportunity to serve someone is to have a conversation based on, like you said, selling, but not selling to meet a certain number or quota, but selling to solve a problem. And you're right. If they're learning things about you and your product or your service along the way, and you're talking with them, and they're in agreement that it sounds exciting, that it sounds like something they could use, then when it comes time to think about whether they would be able to take advantage of the resource you have, it would be a hard time for them. It'd be hard for them to say no if they've been consistently saying yes, and if you've been consistently understanding and listening to what it is, the problems or the needs that they have in their business that you could potentially solve. It's a pretty dynamic relationship, and I can't wait to dig into some of the specifics that you've prepared for today, because I think it'll really help align what we're talking about today.
And I'd like to just thank you. I'd like to just point out that what you just said is why yes questions are so important. We think of them as tie downs. You've heard of tie downs, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know it.
Yes.
You've used tie downs yourself, don't you? Those tie downs feel salesy, and so a lot of salespeople don't like to use them. The point is more about getting the prospect saying yes than it is about using a tie down question that sounds like a tie down. There are other ways to get them to say yes. And one of them is to Ask them what's important to them, this or that. And when they tell you that, later on in the discussion, you can say, you did say that that is important. Did I hear that right? They're going to say yes.
Agree.
And if you
Agree.
said to them, I'm probably surmising that since you said you like that, you're probably not in favor of this. Is is that something you would agree with? Yes. So those are different ways of getting to yes questions. What I'm going to do though, let's walk through the presentation. I don't want to spill my candy in the lobby, right? That's
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 a
kind of like
that
the
Yeah, that's a pretty famous identification of someone who's really not going to probably leave that situation with a sale because they're actually just overwhelming and dumping. People
yeah,
don't, when you spill the candy in the lobby, people don't know which flavor they should pick or even if they're going to like the candy because you didn't ask them what they like first and foremost. So yeah, don't
exactly.
spill it. Let's go.
Nothing happens until something is sold. I got this a long time ago. I don't remember if it was Zig Ziglar or W. Clement Stone, but these guys were big into selling. This goes back into the 20s and 30s, Dale Carnegie days, and nothing happens till something is sold. And so often we get caught up in all of this, the website and these things, but you have to make a sale. And the sales process, this is for owners who also choose to sell, CEOs, executives, anyone who finds themselves selling in an undefined or unscripted sales type situation. And the idea is we're going to follow the same sales process the way and is designed the way customers like to buy or prospects like to buy, but we're going to do it in a way that we're in control of the roadmap, but we're allowing them to pick and choose where they stop on that roadmap. So if you think about it as a sales journey, we're constantly moving along, but we know where we're going. We know where the signposts are. And what we're doing is helping them, we're priming them for what's coming next.
Yeah.
And in that priming, we're then being able to turn control over to them, if that makes sense. So they feel like they are in control because they are, and all we're doing is the bigger guide. It's almost like being a tour guide and letting the group pick and choose where they want to stop and spend time, but we're on this tour. And that's the idea of the roadmap. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind here. And because it does come into play, we're not going to talk much more about neuroscience, but there's 5 points that really come into play, and each one of these are interdependent of the other. Uh, there's physiology. Physiology is a big one. If you look at Amy Cutter's work, she's the one who talks about the Superman pose and all that. But when you start preparing as a salesperson, you definitely want to have the right physiology. You want to be thinking about what is your physiology in terms of selling to the other person, because that's going to communicate to them confidence or diffidence. It's going to communicate to them, are you really engaged with what's important to them, etc. The beliefs, these you can work on before the pre-call, but if you don't believe that your product or service is good for this person, you're not ready to present to them. Now, you can't put off the presentation, so what you have to do is make sure that you believe your product or service is right for the people. And the way I handle it is I make a decision up front. I'm not going to accept a client who's not at this point in their journey, because if they're not a good fit, then I don't want their money. Now, I don't say that to them, but that's my thinking. So I get the belief taken care of right away. The neuroplasticity through deep practice, every book, class, seminar, course I've ever taken that talked about high performance salespeople always has something in there about great salespeople practice their presentation. It's the speaking. It's mediocre salespeople tend to think of this as, oh, I practice in my mind. I don't need to do that. What they miss is that speaking is a physiological thing, a neurobiological thing, because it takes neural pathways to speak. Neural pathways that are used with deep practice get myelinated, and that becomes the path of least resistance, which is what a habit is. So speaking out loud with your presentation is much better than just thinking about it, because you're using your voice, you're using your muscles, you're associating, you're making associations, and you're deepening those neural pathways. This is why salespeople, great salespeople, they always have another answer, they always have another response, and it always fits and it's always elegant because they practice it so many times, just like an athlete practicing a move. Priming, we are priming ourselves, and we have to prime the prospect. This is why we give context. We tell them what's coming up next. We're priming them how to look at this thing. If I'm going to talk to them and I know that there's a feeling that X, Y, and Z can lead to ABC, I may prime that part of the conversation with. Now, I know there's some data out there that says X, Y, Z can lead to ABC, but I want to put that into proper context. It only happens when this is so. So I've taken that off the table. I want to be the one who introduced that and not let it come from inside of them, because if it comes from inside of them, it's perceived as truth. This is the priming problem. This priming happens very early. It happens as soon as you say a few words. They hear a few words, and if they prime that this is bad, it's harder to turn that around because it becomes their truth, even though it's just hearsay. And then the last one is mindset, having a growth mindset. I think that's important. It's not just having a growth mindset, not a fixed one, but it's being able to get to a growth mindset very, very quickly. And I'll give you an example that I used to use when I was selling life insurance. This was way before internet. And so people would literally write a check. When I felt like a sale was slipping away, I would visualize them writing the check. Now, I did this for years before knowing what's going on. Now, understanding neuroscience, when I visualize them writing the check, it has nothing to do with communicating to their head. It may do that. There might be some mirror neuron stuff going on. But what it's doing is it's telling myself, my subconscious, that this is the outcome. This is what we're going after by seeing them write the check. And we'll talk about the reticular activating system a little bit because it does apply. But the reticular activating system starts noticing and looking for things, and it helps me to say whatever I need to say to make that sale. For years, I didn't know why it worked. I just knew it worked. And, you could very easily slip into the mystical mumbo jumbo. It's not that. It's just that I am setting myself up to move towards that picture I made, which is them writing the check. And it helps me access what I know. The opposite of that would be knowing that when people are afraid, they shut down, they start closing down, they lose access. So by seeing the person write the check, it moves the vision out again. It gives me access to things I can say. And that's probably the easiest way to describe what that is. So I'm going to stop there because I know that some of these things must have resonated with you since you've been selling and training salespeople. You've seen it from both sides.
100%. I used to say to my sales team, I can teach you all kinds of skills all day long, but if you don't have the right mindset, or if you come into this sales situation with these ideas about, or bad ideas about the service that we're providing or the customers that we interact with, then you're setting yourself up for failure, but you're also setting up the person you're trying to help for failure. So the mindset, you can have all the skills that you want, but if the mindset isn't right, you are creating a constant resistance, and that constant resistance is not allowing you as a professional, that business owner that needs to sell, or a salesperson that needs to sell, it's not allowing you to open your mind, and therefore you're not going to be successful in opening up that prospect's mind. They need to be able to see what the possibilities are. And I love the idea of priming. I do that all the time right now in my business practice with individuals who I work with who come in, and we start talking about a pathway that's not W-2, that is self-sufficiency. And they start thinking, I can see them in their mind going, oh, I could never be successful. I don't have the right tools. I don't have the right money. I don't think I can do this. So I prime that by saying 75% individuals have thought about, or dreamt about, or even maybe started to pursue the idea of becoming self-sufficient, but they stop because all of these things, these fears, like you said, the fears come in and they narrow it down. And what we say about fear is it's false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
So let's find out, because you've primed yourself to think that this is impossible for you. Let's find out what is true, what is not true, and see if we can change that mindset, because with that mindset, you can put all those transferable skills to work for you in a totally different way. And in a sales situation, you can put those skills that you have and the knowledge you have about the product you're going to sell and the reason why it's important and why you believe in it and put it to good use to help somebody else understand. It's a resource potentially for them as well. Love this. I love this. And I know the neuroscience is something, Mo, that you have an amazing expertise on. And so I love listening and learning to you learning from you and how it really does apply and can change us and make us work for good and
Thank you. I
use for
appreciate
good
that.
what we used to not used for good and not becoming a sales professional become a sales professional that is positive and using what we have in our neurons for good. So
I like, and thank you, but I like what you were talking about with the priming. And I want you to think about that as I go through some of these slides, because I'll tell you what we're doing is this roadmap. This is what symbolizes the roadmap. And you see, I have this pre-qualify,
mm-hmm.
this pre-qualify step where you have rapport and the know, like, and trust. But there's a stop sign. It says decide. And the reason it says decide, it's tied into what you were describing as people have primed themselves into believing that they can't do it. And knowing that that's coming down here, it can change what I want to think about as I build rapport. So I'm not just building rapport. I'm building rapport in a direction that primes them. So the difference is unpriming somebody to reprime them versus intentionally priming them so the thing that they would have primed themselves to is never even on the table. That is the model we're talking about. So I want you to keep thinking about how what you said and believe and you've done and seen, how we move that upstream to happen in such a way that it's almost like we're preventing things from happening. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is pre-qualify, and then a rapport, confirm, and align. And this alignment is wherever it is. I don't need, if this is the sale, this is the end sale, I don't need 100% alignment here. I only need alignment that yes, you would like to be healthy, right? It's motherhood and apple pie. How are they going to say no? You would like alignment on being able to use more of what you already know.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of alignment is easy for them to agree on, right? So that's all I need to move forward. Once I have enough rapport, because we don't want to break rapport by adding too much in there. Once I make that decision, here's what's going on though. I am deciding, if I confirm, I am choosing to go on, not
Mm-hmm.
them. I'm not going to ask them a question that makes me stop. My question was about confirm and align, but
Mm-hmm.
then I'm back in control. I'm telling them, not maybe explicitly, but I'm deciding that we're going to slow this thing down and pick up the rest later. If they are interested, then I'm going to schedule, we'll continue, or we will delay, depending. If they are aligned and want to do this, but now is not the right time, I'll schedule. If they are definitely eager and I'm seeing the buying signals and they want yes, 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 right? We're going to continue. If it makes sense to them, but they're just not there yet, they're not in market, there's a lot of other ifs, ands, and buts that have to happen, I'm going to stop there. It's great. I'm around, so I'm sure we'll see each other at different times. Whatever it is, you're going to delay it till some future time. Remember, this is the owner selling, so we're not in a typical sales presentation. Maybe networking, maybe you see somebody at the gas station or whatever. And I'm going to go to this next one because this is where I think most people will naturally go to, is the fact finding. And we all know this, open-ended questions. And of course, I use open-ended questions in the pre-step
Yeah.
with qualify and rapport. Either or questions. Do you like it in black or is red better for you? Which one of those? And the situation and problem. That's a little bit taking from spin, which I'll cover. I'm going to stop there because I know that fact finding is an important area for you and something that you've always trained on, the fact finding. But I want you to take these two and talk about them together Carrie, I just want to hear what's coming up for you.
So you're talking about the pre-qualifying and the fact finding, or the
Mhm. Yes, the two major steps. Yeah.
yeah. Um, what's coming up for me is the idea that you are you are in control and you have to maintain that control, and that's why you do the pre-qualification, right? Developing staying too much in developing rapport doesn't allow you to assess whether that individual is has any curiosity to go forward, or if you have an alignment with them to go forward. So that pre-qualify and rapport and confirm. And like you said, the alignment doesn't have to be 100% alignment on everything. I like to use the idea of, if you have enough, if you get to know a little bit about them, the confirmation is, are they curious to want to learn more? You're going to be excited because you love your business and you want to talk about it, and you want to attract new customers. But confirming whether they're curious is going to also give you the buy-in, whether they're going to be, wanting to come along with you and answer these fact finding questions, because the fact finding questions will mean nothing if you haven't done some pre-qualification, if you don't have an idea of where their head is at, where their curiosity is at, and what they're whether or not they're going to engage and show up and value the time that you're going to spend together the same way that you will, right? So there's a
Exactly.
value proposition that we're trying to decide in this pre-qualification about the time that they're going to invest, because right now it doesn't cost them any money. It's just a little bit of their time, but
Exactly.
time is money,
Yeah.
right?
And that part you're talking about with the pre-qualify, I envision it like the top of the funnel, and using the funnel as the presentation, and the neck of the funnel is the close. And what we're not just building rapport, back to the earlier step, we're not just building rapport, we're also using this time to gather information that lets us
Yeah,
know what to ask next. It's not just, oh, I like that boat, do you go sailing?
yeah,
It's, I like that boat, how do you
yeah.
stay in such good health? If I'm selling a health product, how do you stay in such good health to be able to manage all those parts of your life? Well, I'm just making that up on the fly, but you get the point. It's not
Yeah.
just rapport, it's rapport with an intention to understand this next slide. And this is
Well,
the spin framework.
yeah.
The
Going, can I just
situation.
clarify one thing? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're
I'm
fine.
excited about this because when I think about fact finding, it's finding out first and foremost where they're at, what world do they live in,
Yeah,
what situation are they in before you can move forward. And then the questioning is about really starting to open that window on why it matters.
right.
And I just interrupt you just before you're ready to set up the spin that really does talk about the
Exactly.
situation is, what is their world like?
And you're right. So Kerry, the idea is that the situation, it's their model of the world. I like to say the map is not the territory. We know what the territory, we think we know what the territory is. They think they know what the territory is, but we both have different maps. And so when
Correct.
you say where are they? So we're figuring out the map. And this is the funnel is, you start with rapport, very broad open-ended questions. You come down to more targeted open-ended questions. And then the other thing that you said that reminds me of how important it is not to get lost in rapport land. Some salespeople don't have a trigger to go into the next one. How do you know when you have enough rapport? You have enough rapport to justify asking fact-finding questions. How do you know when you have asked enough fact-finding questions? You've asked enough fact-finding questions when you've earned the right to go to a deeper level, to more personal fact-finding questions. So you don't get caught in rapport land. If I have enough information, if I have enough justification to move forward, you move forward. And so the spin framework, it's looking at the situation. And this is a part that's very important. There's a problem that they know, but what they don't think about, and you do because you're the business owner, the salesperson, is how this problem leads to other problems. That's the implication. And then exploring the implication. So now we have a target for those open-ended questions. You're not just asking open-ended questions, you're asking open-ended questions so you can predict and surmise what are some likely implications that coexist with that particular problem that they know that they have, because that's when you're going to get the insights. That's when you're going to get the, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, yeah, you're right. That's costing me money over here. They've been focused on this solution, and then the need payoff shows how your solution creates value. So I'm not saying let's do the spin framework, but I'm wanting to connect the dots between this process, rapport, confirm, align, leads us to asking better questions for with open-ended, and then to keep from getting into rapport land and to move the action forward, you use either or questions, because either or questions are now controlling the conversation. You're picking the things that they said and doing an either or to find out, okay, they said this, but are they going this way or are they going that way? The either or questions tell you the direction. Now they start to frame it a little bit. Is they said they like blue. Is it light blue or is it dark blue? Your either or questions are making a picture for yourself to then start asking the situation questions. So
What
that's
is it about blue that you like? What is it about the color blue? Maybe there's something totally random that you may not have even thought about that relates to
exactly
that color blue. Maybe it's something to do with personal health situation they have, or maybe it has something to do with the fact that they have a vision of seeing themselves on the having a house on the ocean one day and love the blue water. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
you just don't know. When somebody used to say to us, "Can we bring pets into the senior living communities that I used to represent?" We would say, "Oh yeah, oh great." Then I could bring my pet snake. You're like, "Oh well, wait a minute. We didn't qualify what kind of a snake you had." So
right.
asking more questions, going a little bit deeper, does provide you a little different lens to what is the problem and why you want to solve it for them.
And what I'm
Not,
pointing out on this slide is,
mhm,
again, for the salesperson, we need to frame ourselves as well. So it's not just asking open-ended questions and either or questions.
yeah,
It's asking with the intention to uncover implications that they may not have thought of themselves. Because it's the
yeah,
implications that tap into the emotion, and it's proximate, it's happening now, and you both have sort of a starting point where you can build on that implication to where it becomes a big enough deal for them that it's going to show up in your presentation. The next slide is, now we're going into the fact finding. So this is why I kind of skimmed through the earlier ones, because we did fact finding, open ended, either or, and then situation. And now what we're doing, we're leaving the open ended. This is fact finding too. We're leaving the open ended. Remember, I said here we have to earn the right to ask more personal
yeah,
questions. So people have a public persona,
yes,
and everybody in their public persona can talk about this stuff. And then people have a more private persona, and the private persona is where we're getting into here.
hmm,
This is, you can't jump into private persona with everybody from there to there. But by going here, I've now earned the right to go into the private persona, and I'm going to avoid the secret persona. I don't want to know their secret stuff. I don't need to know their secret stuff for the selling. And I'm going to keep coming back up to the private persona and maintain the relationship here. I don't know what wounds they have in their personal life. I don't know what issues they have. I don't want that coming up. And if I go into the secret persona, I run the risk of becoming the person who's their proxy for a therapist in that moment. And I don't want that role. I want to stay in the private persona talking about things that they don't usually talk about, but they're trusting me enough. And then that's where we shift into the implication, where we can start talking about the implication. And sometimes you'll use open-ended questions there. So I'm going to pause there and have you just like chime in.
You know, the one thing that strikes me about this is the idea that this to me makes sense from the standpoint of um, comparing the time that you spend with somebody. So this allows you to spend the right amount of time in the right amount within the space, like you said, the public persona, their personal persona, but without going too deep. You have to ask yourself, how much time am I spending in these areas of
Exactly.
fact finding? Because if you're spending, first and foremost, not the right amount of time, but I think the biggest mistake would be rushing through the fact finding phases. However, and never getting into, so only or and rushing through or staying too long, right? Staying too long in fact finding phase number one versus getting into the more, again, detailed, like more specific in terms of the fact finding number two, the really the specifics, the more personal, the more not personal, like again, like those private rooms that you don't want to go into with somebody and become their counselor, but more about the specific situation. And like you said, the consequences of that, because everything has a problem has consequences, and it's typically more than just one consequence. So going a few levels in deep into that and finding out really what really is at the heart of the matter is important. So the timing, when I look at it, what's coming up for me right now is I look at this roadmap, it is also making sure you're spending the right amount of time. Now I see you have the pause at the top of the slide, and I'm curious to know where you insert that pause, Mo, and
Yeah.
in this roadmap, because I think that's a powerful tool that allows us to understand, is our client or is our customer, is our potential, are they ready to move out of
Yeah,
rapport? Are they
exactly.
ready to move from fact finding one to fact finding two? So I really want to get your input too on the pause and how you see it, because I think it's really super powerful.
Yeah,
So I
you
know
nailed it.
that.
And it exists. I would say that when I say professional, ex professional salespeople, and I talk about professional salespeople, what I mean is selling is the highest paid hard profession and it's the lowest paid easy profession. So when I say the word professional, I'm making the distinction that this is a highly paid
Yeah,
salesperson.
yeah,
In other words,
yeah.
they're doing the hard work. Just because you sell doesn't make you a professional salesperson, right? If you're getting paid, you know, something closer to the lower end, right? But when you're a professional salesperson, that's they all know this. They do this, they pause. But regular sales training doesn't drive this. So I have transition, summarize, need payoff, check the temperature, and get a minor commitment. If I don't have that, now remember, we're talking about the owner selling to a big client. You know, if you, let's say you own a Jiffy Lube franchise and you are looking to get the county government vehicles, that contract,
Mhm.
or maybe you're getting a local builder who has a fleet of trucks. You want that contract to be able to change the oil. This is a different kind of sell than your texts are doing to a customer to change the air filter. And you have to have this sixth sense of knowing when to pause and how long to pause. And so you nailed it. That's exactly right. But I don't think it's taught because I don't want to go into the presentation until they are ready.
Uh,
Uh, right now on LinkedIn, there's a lot of folks who set these sales calls, and the sales calls, there's two versions of them. One is they're feeling you out and then they might make the presentation there. The other one is that they fill you out, and if it's alignment, then they put you onto another one. I prefer that one because it gives you, it's an automatic, a defined pause. It's a hard pause that you have to pause. And then you're going to talk to a different person, and that different person can go into the presentation. And so I need to check the temperature, and it's simple stuff, but you get it. That's, do you want to comment on that? Because you already said it. You actually nailed it already by pointing it out.
no, I think that's actually how we met, was the presentation.
Yeah, that is true. That is
Yeah,
true. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that is true.
And it created a heck of a lot more value for me in particular, deciding, how much, you didn't just try to pitch me on that first reach out, that first connection. It was more of like, here's some things that I do. I'd like to know more about what you do. But I think if you're interested, I think we need to have a conversation. To see if this is a good time for us to transition into more than just a hi, maybe we can do business on LinkedIn together. And it was really powerful. It was really meaningful the way you approached me in particular. And I think it's really powerful for professionals, like you said, who are business owners, who are in a different there. It's a different sales
Yeah,
interaction.
for sure.
Really, it's not about a transaction. It's about a transformation. And
Exactly. Yeah.
how
And I
can those
think it,
relationships transform our
I think it
business.
applies to every industry. I think every industry can find a way to make this work. So, but I appreciate your comments there. I'm going to go to this slide. These are just some best practice thoughts. And again, while this is for owners, it applies to salespeople too. It's just that I'm lifting it out in such a way that an owner can see it and understand it without going through sales training and figuring this out for themselves. But these are some best practices I've come across over the years. Selling is serving, like you have to be serving the person. You're helping them solve their problem. It's not your problem. You're not trying to make your commission. You're solving
Yeah.
their problem. You want to bypass early price and product questions. You probably even asked me, since you brought up when we first met, you probably asked me, what does it look like? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. That was a bypass. I'm not going to define what it looks like until
Yeah.
I'm ready to define what it looks like in the context of what's important to you.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to know the price. Yeah, I mean, it actually is going to vary because it's a custom approach. And what we have to do is look at, first of all, is this even a fit?
Yeah.
Whatever. See, here's the thing. The bypass doesn't have to be logical 100%.
Yeah.
There's Robert Cialdini in the 7 Factors of Unconscious Influence. In the first book, he used to use the because frame. He's taken that out in the subsequent books. But the because frame, he did studies, his team did studies, and they showed that if a person, the situation was they were going up to a line of people at a copier, and there were 3 versions. The person says, excuse me, I'm double parked. Can I get in front of you? I'm sorry, can I get in front of you because I'm double parked? The next version was, can I get in front of you? I'm double parked. And they didn't use the word because. And then, can I get in front of you because I need to make some copies? And the because I'm double parked and the because I need to make some copies were so close, something like mid 60% agreement and alignment. But when they said, can I get in front of you? I'm double parked, and left out the word because, the alignment dropped to something in the 40%. The point was the because frame, just saying because, it taps in back to habits, back to least resistance from a kid, right? You grew up, when that because came, you shut down and went a different direction because you knew there was an answer you couldn't win. And as adults, that still happens. My point is, the bypass, if you don't want to talk about price, yeah, it's too early to talk about it, because what happens is that, and then you just add whatever you want to say. It doesn't have to be 100% logical when you use that word because. Slow it down, speaking at a slower pace. I think this is important why salespeople practice. Rephrase, reflect, see and hear the prospect. This gives you a chance to think. A lot of times I'm preparing what I want to say next while I'm rephrasing what they've said. I've got, my mouth and ears are independent. I mean, my mouth and thinking can be independent. I could be saying, tell me more about that while I'm thinking about what I want to say. Or I can say, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, and while I'm thinking about what I want to say. 5 levels deep on important responses. I wouldn't go 5 levels deep every year, but okay, but let's go back to that. You said that this was important to you. I want to understand. I mean, so there's obviously something connected to it. It's more about moving away from something and more about moving towards. That's one level, right? So you say moving towards. Is that something you've always desired, or is it, you just go deeper, 5 levels deep on some of them? And then ORS, open, affirm, rephrase, summarize. This is a quick acronym. APQ, I like this. When they ask you a question, acknowledge the question, personalize why it's important to them, and then follow up with the question. So you acknowledge their question, you personalize it, and then you follow up with your own question. And by acknowledging,
Can you give me an example of that? Like, how do you personalize it? What do you mean?
Yes, I understand what you're asking is, how do you mean? It's kind of a nuance I just acknowledged. And you're asking me to personalize it. It's because I know that in your field, you see yourself already training and talking to other people. So obviously it's going to be important for you to have that context of what it means. I just personalized it.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to ask a question. Let me ask you, do you actually see yourself teaching this to anybody? So I acknowledged it, I personalized it, and I asked you a question. And it didn't even feel like any of that because it was just conversational. But it's, again, something in your mind. And this is, again, my practice. And I'll stop when I get to the end of this, have you respond, but make sure they're experiencing being in control. So you are guiding them but you're letting them control the nuances. You're guiding the big picture, they're controlling the detail. And and then telling isn't selling, asking is. So this is probably a good place for us to pause and see what's coming up for you.
Bypass early price and product questions is really important in what I do with coaching for potential business owners, because there is all kinds of opportunities related to the price of an investment they could make in a business ownership model. There's all kinds of verticals and different lines of business ownership that they can be curious about, and maybe they didn't even think that there's possibilities. More importantly, there's probabilities based on what I know about them and what they think about what they can do or cannot do in business ownership. That's a probability. Oh, I should go into this because it's what I've been doing for 30 years. But there's also possibilities. So bypassing that early is
Yes.
important, because it may really leave something that's important on the it may not put something on the table that's really important for them to learn about, that could be life changing for them. But it's
Yeah.
hard to do because people want to know what they're in for, in terms of, is there a price, or is this product going to be of service to me? So I try to always say, and let me ask a question. Because is the word you want to use. Is that correct?
It's optional, but when you use the word because, you have the click were factor going for you that Robert Cialdini talks about in his book Influence. Scarcity, rapport, because, authority, and consistency. Those are some of those factors that you automatically, social proof would be another one. You get automatic compliance because the person is so conditioned. And because is one of those conditioning words.
And I often say, because I don't want to miss an opportunity to understand what your income and your lifestyle goals are.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just say this. I will tell you that in practice, I don't always use the word because, and it's because I've learned to use my intonation and my vernacular to imply because. So I can say, sure, it's because XYZ, or I can say, sure, XYZ, blah. You know what? I don't have to say the word because, I'm implying it. And the other thing that price bypass that makes bypass important is that sometimes people accept to meet with you because they want to know the cost. So the
Mm.
cost becomes a leverage point, and I don't want to give them the cost until I've explored and I've decided whether or not we're a good fit or not. I'm not
Mhm.
letting them decide, because they may have already decided, but they don't know the entire spectrum of what I'm offering. So they're
Yeah.
not in a position to decide whether or not this is right for them until we've explored more. And once we've
Yeah.
explored more, I'll be in a position to say we should go on, or this is probably not a good fit.
Yeah.
And I can tell them the price. Then at that point, it doesn't matter.
I would caution those also who want to say, well, what if I just give them a range? And the range, giving them a range, is, what do you think that they're going to hear? They're going to hear either the lowest
Yeah.
and think that oh, that sounds like that's an affordable option for me, or they'll think the highest and they'll qualify themselves out. So you're giving them the range that doesn't allow them to really get the knowledge about why the service or the product that you're offering has a value proposition for
And they
them.
also give up their position. They're in a position of power by not giving the price. Once they give the range, they've lost that. I would
Yeah.
say it's probably better than giving the actual price, but it's much better to turn it into more fact finding. Let's go
Yeah.
to the next one.
Perfect.
And this is the spin. So open-ended questions. I just aligned it with spin. Open-ended questions, and there's my funnel. Situation, either or, understand the problem. More evaluation type questions. This is just literally what it says. You're evaluating the answers in terms of prioritization. You're deciding. You've got the either or, so you know the three things they like. But now I need to know the order. You said you like blue, green, and red. Which one of those has the has the strongest connection for you? I'm evaluating it, and that allows me to then come up with implication, and then this is the need payoff. So you were asking me about that pause, And that pause is because I'm going to eventually give a demonstration. This is what people think of traditionally as a presentation, but I'm calling it a demonstration because I want to demonstrate how what I found out here and what they know they exist for them. And I'm going to demonstrate how my product or service is what they want and what they need because of the problem that they know exists, the implications of that problem, and the need payoff. What I'm doing is demonstrating how that works. So we both have the picture. This is creating that picture for them that this solution is right for them. And that's why I call it a demonstration. And so these are the things we do in the pre-call. This is a sort of a recap. These are the things we do in fact finding. And then these are the things we do in the demonstration. And there's more. I mean, I could talk about the yes questions, etc. Let's see. And here it is, the presentation and demonstration, how solution solves the needs. This is what I just said. The either or questions provide the content for your presentation and yes questions and tie down. So my yes questions are not, you want to buy this, don't you? The yes questions are, so blue is your favorite color. I mean, you like it better than green. Did I get that right? Yes. Okay. I want 30 yeses. If I can get 30 or 40 yeses, it's almost impossible for them to not want to buy it because they've stacked the deck for themselves.
Yeah.
The implicit downstream problems caused by the explicit problems provide emotional triggers because the fact that they haven't thought about it makes it new. Novelty is interesting. And the fact that they hadn't thought about it, it's almost like, bam, the subconscious wakes up and says, oh my gosh, this thing is important because it's the way it's presented. And then you continue expanding know, like, and trust along the way because know, like, and trust keeps earning you the right to go deeper into that private persona. Let's go to this slide and then you can sort of talk through it because this is what we have is the transition, the demonstration, and then the recommend. We won't get into the close today, but how you close is the recommendation, and this is that offshoot. So I just want to get your comments on where we are today so far, what we've covered. I'll go back to this slide.
Well, as you just pointed out, the demonstration part of it, could you go back to that slide for just a minute, please?
This one or this one?
The one that has the three. There we go. Yeah. What I find so fascinating about this is the idea that once you get to demonstration, it's not really about talking about you're not presenting, putting the product on the table. You're not opening up some fancy, box that has bells and whistles going off. You're really demonstrating how what they've shared with you gave you an opportunity to help them solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the demonstration is a visualization of that problem that you are there and can help them solve. And I think about the idea that when we talk about the mindset is there, so the pre-call is about getting that mindset ready. The fact finding creates that opportunity for you to understand when you get to that demonstration part, how their current world is, what is the problem, and hopefully you understand because you've asked enough curiosity questions, you understand what they're willing to do moving forward as it relates to the consequences that change or solving a problem are going to bring to them. Some people will say, nah, that's too much. We're not going to fix it because it's going to create a mess. It's going to create more problems. But if you can really, really show them how it will solve the bigger problem, then the demonstration is just really going back and reiterating what they've already told you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that is why I have these pauses, these hard pauses in there, because I am not ready to present until I have the conviction that you just articulated right there. All right. Hey, Kerry, we're going to run short on time. I don't want to cover the close. I'll do that the next time. I'll get into the close because it's too much of a scary event for people. And I want to present it in such a way that people realize the close is nothing more than piggybacking on what you just said. It's the natural progression of the conversation. And if you feel stress going into the close, it's because you haven't done the rest of the work.
Right.
And that again, I'll make the distinction. A, a salesperson in a defined sales role may not have the freedom of action to not present something or to not close because they have to answer to their sales manager, which is that was you, and they
Mhm.
have to tell you why they didn't close, and you're not going to accept that answer. But when you're an owner or an executive, a C-suite person selling to another equal owner of another company, executive of another company, you do have that freedom of action to put it off and not close until you know that you have the conviction, which is also, by the way, why I don't present until I know that I can go through to the close. So that's why we're stopping here. The presentation and the close go together. You don't want to present
Mhm.
have to do a follow up because it's going to
Yeah.
be very difficult to get the emotion to that level on the next time. You have to use that emotion that's tied into them solving the explicit and implicit problem, that's tied
Mhm.
into the life that you've helped them envision. That emotion is what's going to make them disregard the price.
Yeah. It
And
is.
without the emotion, they go into logic, and logic makes them want to shop because logic says, well, is this price better than that price? But if you're an entrepreneur selling, you know that your service has nuances and you can't compare apples and oranges. And so you
Yeah.
don't want that to go into a comparison conversation. You want to keep it in a solving needs problem or conversation. Make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. You just brought a key word that I think we have to make sure, especially as we're talking to business owners, not a typical sales title person, as well as for me when I'm talking to individuals who become business owners, and that is the emotion. It needs to be an emotional exchange because you're getting to when you're problem solving for somebody, it's getting to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
And again, it's not just leaving behind something that is there because you sold them something that they didn't want or didn't need.
Right.
And I think that emotion part of it is really, really important in this journey as you talk about the higher level sales professional. And as a CEO, as a C-suite person, sometimes it may feel like people don't see that emotion of you because you're in a leadership role and you're trying to stay away from the emotion so you can lead a team and lead them to an end product or finish a product or a plan. But when you're trying to interact with somebody who can be helpful in that plan with you, you have to connect with them. Someone that's going to become part of your team that isn't already part of your team. There should be some kind of an emotional connection for you to want to move forward and do business together.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all around, and it goes back to the rapport, and it goes back to why I have no like and trust going along the whole time. You
Yep.
don't just. It's not like okay, I did the rapport. Now I can. No, you have to
People,
keep.
yeah, people who
You have to
do
keep it going.
this,
Yeah,
they
and
know,
and, and,
they
and
like them.
with the short attention spans, you know that you have to keep bringing people in. We're going to close it here, Terry. This has been great. I love the
Right.
conversation. Hope we could do this again. I'd love to be able to do this again with the presentation into the close. And then if there's time, we'll talk about lead generation because that's what happens before this. You have to
Absolutely.
get some leads coming in. Any
Fantastic.
closing comments you want to make before we sign off?
No, I've enjoyed the time together with you, Mo, as I always do, because you just really keep things practical and you give me as well as listeners something that they can hold on to and take forward into their businesses. So thank you
Okay.
for your
Until
time.
next time, we'll see you.